Welcome to Behind the Tools. Here's Tradify CEO and your host, Michael Steckler.
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Behind the Tools. This week we have Jarrad Sharp over in Perth, Australia from Sharp Air Conditioning. It's been a while since we had someone who's in aircon actually. So Jarrad, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate you having me.
No, I appreciate you giving up the time. I know you're a busy man. So you're in air conditioning. Do you want to maybe start by just telling us kind of how you got into the business, what prompts you to become a tradesperson?
Yeah, for sure. So I wasn't overly keen on finishing high school. Just wasn't really for me. Dad entered the trade in the 80s and he'd been doing that. He just said it was something to do that would be quite profitable, especially in Western Australia with our very hot and dry summers. So I thought, I don't want to finish. What am I going to do? And I just thought I'd give that a crack. And at least then I thought, no matter what happened, I'd have a trade to fall back on. So
right.
Yeah, I just thought I'd get stuck into that. And that's how it all began.
So it's not an uncommon story to have sort of a family member that's already in the trades. And do you think that helped get you over the line in terms of deciding to go down that path?
Yeah, for sure. I was very undecisive. I really didn't know what I wanted to do at all. So it was just honestly a suggestion. Like I was going to pick a trade, and I think air conditioning is probably one of the cleaner trades out there, especially when you get started. So I thought it'd be a good one. Almost everyone's going to need an aircon mechanic. So yeah, that's just what I thought I'd do, and yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. Still do.
And how did you get into aircon? Did you start an apprenticeship with the firm, or how did you get actually?
Yeah, exactly. So you do a 4-year apprenticeship. So I just started working for a local air conditioning company. I started off my apprenticeship doing commercial air conditioning. So we mainly did like a lot of high-rise buildings and just big commercial spaces as opposed to residential. And then I finished off my apprenticeship with another company who sort of did air conditioning, more residential, appliance repairs, all that sort of stuff. So that's sort of how I picked that side of it up.
And what prompted you to change companies when you were doing the apprenticeship? What prompted you to go to the other company?
I just wasn't learning a lot. The problem with a big company, especially one that does commercial work, is you just get used, really just used as like a glorified cleaner, I suppose. And when I went into it, I really knew like I wanted to be successful, and everything I do, I try and give it 150%. So I just wasn't having the opportunity to learn. And I found all the learning I would do was at TAFE. I wouldn't get any hands-on experience. I'd come to TAFE once a week. All my friends would be saying, oh, I've done this. Whereas I spent the whole week sort of cleaning. And I found that, which is fair enough as like maybe a first year apprentice, you're getting into it, you builds up a bit of like work ethic. But coming into my third year and towards the end of my third year and still not having much knowledge on like actual repairs and stuff, I just thought it's just not going to work. So I sort of had a chat to my boss like numerous times and said, look, I really want to just be put on some other jobs. We've got 10 technicians on the road, like people are doing this stuff every day. I'm just not having that opportunity to do it because it wasn't making them as much money, unfortunately. Yeah. So I did try and say, look, this is what I want to do. And it just kept sort of getting shut down to a point where I just said, all right, I'm just going to do my 4th year with another company. So that's how it started. It's not how I wanted it to go, but it ended up being really, really good for me, for sure. Sort of launched everything.
And what is the? I mean, it's not completely uncommon. What do you think drove their behaviour in terms of not allowing you to sort of get more involved and get more on the tools?
I think because they were such a big company, just taking on a lot of work, and they just didn't have the manpower to do some of the cleaning jobs. And the tradesmen, if they were put on that sort of stuff, like that had obviously like upset them. That's not what they want to be doing every day. So the best thing to do is you just put an apprentice on it, and then you can just leave them alone to just, clean for weeks on end, sometimes in these massive buildings. And that's it. You just let them do it. And it's obviously very profitable for the companies to do that. And they just make a lot more money off it. It doesn't slow them down because you just go off and do it, I suppose. So unfortunately, money, when it comes to that, drives a lot of that. And it sort of does, it doesn't make it overly good for the young apprentices trying to learn some stuff and become good at the trade.
Yeah, and then they have a gap because you could obviously have a qualified technician there that you're not going to get because it's just not going to, you might end up being qualified eventually from what you're doing at TAFE, but not from being on the tools and having that
Oh, for
experience,
sure.
which is really important. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's the other thing. It's like this is sort of like always got the speech, oh, you'll pick it up later. But I feel like it's something that if I'd completed my apprenticeship there, then I would have been stuck there because I wouldn't have been able to get a job anywhere else due to the fact that I hadn't got the knowledge yet. So rather than wait and just hope I can pick it up on my own, I thought I'd just be a bit more proactive and just go and take a chance on another mob who worked out really well.
That's great. And then you sort of stayed there, and then you eventually, obviously, you've set up your own thing, your own business. Talk me through, when that happened and what prompted you to sort of go out alone.
Yeah, for sure. So it definitely wasn't planned. It's not something I ever envisioned myself doing. Basically, when I got my job as the 4th year of my apprenticeship, the company that I was working for, they contracted out all of their staff. So all their warranty work, repairs was all subcontractors. And they were planning on hiring me as the first employed technician, and they were going to wean off the subcontractors and just start getting more full-time employees. That was the plan. After I finished my apprenticeship, someone over east, one of the big wigs, decided they're not going to do that anymore. And so they basically gave me the option to become a contractor, or that's pretty much it. I'd have to just go and find another job. So I was kind of backed into a corner, but I did I picked up a lot in that year. Like I literally learnt more in probably the first 6 months there than I did in my entire 3-year apprenticeship. They gave me they let me just go and sort of do my thing and pick it up just by sort of doing it, which was really good for me. And then so after that, they basically just said, look, do you want to become a contractor? They guided me through the process. They helped me with registering everything, like insurances, business name. They just said, look, this is what you have to do. And then the work was actually the exact same as I was already doing as an apprentice. So I already knew what was going on. So it was just a matter of sending them invoices at the end of the week, and everything else was pretty much the same. So that's how it started.
That's great. It sounds like they were a sort of decent bunch. I mean, it didn't pan out on one hand, but it sounds like they helped you.
For sure, they were brilliant. I still contract for them these days, like in a smaller capacity, but they were amazing. They gave me a van for 6 months free of charge. They paid for all my petrol and everything. They really helped me to get started, just because they did feel a bit guilty because it wasn't them. It wasn't my bosses that were making that decision. It was huge companies, so just someone a bit higher up. So they literally just completely got me started, and you really helped out with everything. So
they're
definitely very good.
Presumably they didn't want the overhead of permanent employees, so but you still had the same level of demand of work. So it kind of worked out well
for sure.
in that respect. Yeah,
exactly. Worked out really well. They were doing that for you. They'd have had subbies for 40 odd years, so they'd be doing that for ages anyway, and they just decided they're not gonna go full-time just yet. So that's sort of how it happened.
So that's how you end up having your own business. And then one of the things I'm intrigued by when people go out on their own is you naturally had a sort of pipeline of work from your previous employer as a contractor. How did you approach sort of building out your own base of customers for your business?
Basically slowly. It was very very slow process. So I just started advertising on Gumtree. I started at one point just dropping flyers into people's letterboxes, just sort of walking around the neighborhoods and that sort of stuff. And then later on, I got into Facebook and joined some local chat pages, and that they've been really good. They sort of launched everything into the next level. But before that, it was just steadily picking up my own stuff to a point where I just couldn't contract much for them at all. It just wasn't as profitable to stick with contracting for them. So I just started almost completely doing my own thing for a while.
Cool. And what sort of gave you your first set of leads? Was it the leaflets? Did that work?
It's hard to say. I didn't really follow up on where I actually got the jobs from. That's probably the downfall. I didn't actually see where these jobs were coming from. I just kind of did them, which we do now. We always ask our clients how they found us, just so we can sort of see where we can put more,
Put more
time
money.
into.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so yeah, they just sort of came from, I guess, all over. Though it must have been a mixture of Gumtree and Facebook and flyers and pretty much everything to start with.
Yeah, and then once you got those, I mean, one of the common problems I think we see in this business is, sometimes your first customers aren't always your best customers. Sometimes they are. How did you identify, or did you not care as much in terms of people that were the sort of customers you would want in the future, that were going to pay enough and all those types of things? Sometimes sort of via a Gumtree or those sort of classified sites often attracts people that want the cheapest,
For sure.
cheapest job. How did you think about that? Did you think about that at all? Was that an issue as you took on new work?
Initially, not really, to be honest. I just wanted to get as much work as I could get,
Yeah.
so that wasn't really a concern of mine. Where I needed the work when I started off, because I just didn't, I wanted to fill the entire weeks with my own stuff. So I was just taking on literally anything. Like I'd drive like an hour away from my house just to do a simple job, sort of. So I just literally just took everything I could get, to be
Right.
honest. And
Yeah.
yeah.
And how did that play out? Was the work generally good, or was there customers that you got that you kind of, you're looking back now, probably wouldn't take?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely. I was definitely the cheaper end when I started. I was probably, sort of the cheapest.
Right.
So now I'm definitely not the cheapest, but our quality is exceptional. Nothing's changed even since I've taken on another technician. Our quality of work is really on point. We'd be the best in the West, I would say. So we're able to charge fairly for the quality now, whereas before it was just like, I need to pay the bills, so I better get some work in, sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes total sense. And what was you came from being an employee, then a contractor. What was the hardest thing once you sort of did have to? You talked about paying the bills. I mean, what was the hardest thing once you switched over to going sort of fully against your own business?
Just finding work, I think initially was, I was pretty privileged. I was still living with mum and dad at the time. So
Yeah.
if I didn't have masses of work, it's not like I had heaps of bills to pay, sort of thing. So I was able to start slowly, which is really fortunate, because a lot of people don't have that option. So it's either you get work or you don't eat, sort of thing. You can't pay the rent.
Right.
So I was very fortunate in the fact that I'd put everything into it, but if I wasn't, some weeks I'd make next to no money when I started, with fuel and everything, and I'd drive so far, I'd literally just make next to nothing. So it just slowly started building up from there. And then, so that, I guess that's how it that's probably the most challenging thing, was just getting the work in initially.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And then, you talk about you're mainly residential, you do some commercial. What is your favorite type of work now that you've been doing it for a while?
I definitely prefer commercial. I love, the best thing about residential is the customers, because I do love talking to customers, and sort of everything's different. Every job is different. You always meet different people, and everyone's got sort of an interesting story. So that's what I love about residential. But commercial is it's just very easy. It's, most of the parts I'd sort of carry, or I can get from my supplier at no notice, because it's a shelved item. You go there, you deal with the reception or whoever, whoever's the manager or whatever it is, and you just fix it and you just get paid for it. So it's more profitable. It's similar difficulty, but it's more profitable work, because a lot of the work's a bit more urgent. Like if someone's got a cool room going down and they've got heaps of stock in there, they sort of need to get it fixed. So as long as you look after them, they will just, they won't ask you for pricing. They'll just say, yep, I've got a breakdown, come out, fix it, and send us the bill, sort of thing.
And how do you think about that longer term? Are you thinking about doing more commercial because of that? That's what you've just outlined?
Yeah, for sure. I'd like to get into 50-50 commercial residential, because I think at the moment we probably only have about 10% commercial, because we just do so much residential work. But yeah, definitely I'd like to go for a 50-50 split, and I'd like to get one technician eventually who specializes in commercial refrigeration. Whereas my background's more like I can do both, but my background's more air conditioning. Whereas I'd like to, just get someone specializing in just commercial, the side of things, so they can just do that is the goal.
Yeah, it's a great goal, especially considering what you've just said. And how will you approach that? And there's the hiring side of it, but how are you going to approach sort of winning more commercial work, or is there an approach to that that's different?
I think we just need to get out a bit more. It's just been so crazy. Like we've tried to business develop, and Dad originally started business developing. He sort of built our builders side up quite a lot, but we've just run out of time to get out there and actually build the business. So we're just trying to keep on top of the leads we've got coming in at the moment. So we just don't have those spare days to go out and drive around the commercial areas and sort of just meet people and say, look, this is what we do. So that's what we're going to do eventually. It's just, been so crazy. We just haven't had any time for it. So we'll definitely be able to get the work. It's just about putting in that time to go out and sort of get it, really.
Yeah. And then, when you're doing residential work, one of the things that intrigued me, I think when we spoke to you before this, was you talked about things that your sort of lookouts for how to spot customers that you may not want. I'm quite intrigued to dig into that because I think it's really helpful for people that are thinking about starting out and taking those sort of first jobs, some of which I think you do need to take just to get a portfolio of work and get your name out there. But are there warning signs you see when you meet customers which make you think, I don't want to work with this customer in particular?
Yeah, I'm pretty good at like gauging people just off talking to them. So you do pick that up, just like little words they might use, like if they're sort of throwing out cheap or free. It's stuff like that. You can sort of just say, oh, they're not going to be a valuable client. So it's something that, and I'd still send them a quote as per normal. I'm not just going to ignore them because that's just not how we operate. But I'll send them a quote, and I know 100% it's not coming back. Like I'm not going to win the work. So you just sort of pick it up just off that sort of stuff, especially in the peak of summer, because we just have so many inquiries. Like it's absolutely insane. And some of them, sometimes, like if they'll leave a voicemail, like I'll respond to it. But if I just get calls and or a text saying, like, can you do this, price me for this or something, I just sort of let some of them sort of go, to be honest, because you just know they're not going to be valuable.
Yeah. I was saying, especially sort of in summer for you there, and what does it get to? It gets pretty hot, right?
Yeah, pretty hot. We had this summer gone, we probably had the hottest was probably like 3-4 consecutive 45 odd degree days, which is quite warm. So that was it sends everything into a bit of a frenzy. I sort of just have to put my phone on silent in those days and just do the work, because we just can't. Like I'll get 40 plus calls a day in the peak of summer, and I just can't deal with them all. So because I'm still on the tools as well, it's just hard to take calls and do that while I'm sort of on job sites and stuff. So
that's crazy. That's a crazy number. And how do you think about resourcing against that? Is there any point where you think it's worth hiring someone else earlier just for that period to help you out, or to even manage some of that stuff?
Yeah, for sure. So even having another tech on board, because I hired a technician in September, and without him it would have just been an absolute crazy summer. I don't even know if I would have survived it. So we had him, and we're still able to split, but I do need to look at getting someone in the office, at least part-time. And Mum sort of said she'd be interested in doing that, just dropping a day at her job and maybe doing a day in the office to start off with, and then we'll just sort of see if we can build up from there. And I think eventually she'd just like to come into the business as well and just work part-time just for us, sort of thing. So I'd like to explore that probably coming into next summer, and then I can literally just focus on being back on the tools and other bits and pieces. So that's the plan for that.
Yeah, it's good to hear you got a plan. That seems to be, the smart way to approach it is outsourcing the things that you either don't enjoy, or more importantly, just don't have the time for, right? You just described it. If you've got 40 phone calls coming in a day and you're trying to get
for sure,
it's impossible to manage that. Whereas if you had someone in the back office, I guess they could take those calls and
take the stress off a lot, for sure. So we've already outsourced like our bookkeeping and our accounting and stuff. So that's all sort of done by third parties. And that's just saved me so much time, so I can just focus more on building the business and just getting the jobs done that we sort of already have, which has been great. Like I should have done that a long time before I actually sort of did. So that was good.
Yeah, that was my next question. Was when did you decide to outsource the sort of bookkeeping side of things? When did that happen?
Probably would have been like about a year and a bit ago. It just got too crazy, and I was never really good at the sort of bookkeeping side. Like I wasn't good at all the reconciling and all the stuff that goes on behind the scenes. It's just not my specialty. It's like I'm very good at what I do specifically, but all that other stuff I've never learned it because I just got thrown into it. I never studied that. I never looked like at YouTube how to do it, but like all the time I'd waste trying to figure out how to do it. I could just make more money just doing what I'm good at and then just outsourcing it to someone who's not going to make any errors. They're just going to always be on time, remind me to pay my tax on time, all the stuff I just forget because it was just so crazy. So that's when I decided like I've got to outsource it. It's just too much.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's the smartest move for most people because you're right. Actually, I think sometimes it's seen as a cost, but the cost tends to, the benefits outweigh the cost. I think eventually, because like you said, you can be focused on the things you're good at, and you don't get that stress of, trying to come back and deal with those things. And
exactly.
anything else that you sort of looking back, there's a lot of people set up their own companies. Anything else you look back on, I think you would have done differently apart from just even the bookkeeper possibly? Is there anything else you would look back on that you would have approached differently when starting out on your own?
I definitely would have got Tradify 2 years earlier. That would have helped me out a hell of a lot because I was just doing everything pen and paper. Everything I did was on my diary. For years, I was managing all my jobs and all my rebook for parts and everything, just writing it down in a diary, and that was just an absolute mess. And it was sort of normal for me because I got used to it, but just I'd forget things and I'd write it too small and I couldn't read my own writing if I was in a hurry. So I'd be like, oh, what's this for? And these days it's all just on a screen and everything's sort of, right in front of me, and it's makes my life so much easier. A friend told me to get onto it about a year and a half ago, and that made a massive difference. So I definitely would have done that earlier for sure.
Yeah, cool. That's good to hear. No, appreciate you using it. And it seems that those are the things, right? Job management software, bookkeeping, or an accountant that supports, what you do there, and then potentially kind of outsourced or someone who's part of the company, as you've described, you can help you with those, back office, for want of a better word, functions, right? Which includes managing that sort of lead gen side of things.
I think definitely those are the things. I think everything else, I think we've done pretty well, to be honest. Like everything else has gone pretty smoothly. So it's just that sort of side that's the only thing I really would think I would have done earlier.
Yeah. And is there anything else that's sort of changing for you, industry wise, or with sort of I want to use the word carefully, post COVID, but that you've seen significant changes you've had to adapt to in that period?
I mean, the obvious sort of like physical, mask wearing and social distancing, everyone sort of had to abide by. And sometimes that can be a bit tricky because a lot of customers somehow in this day and age are, still anti-vax or whatever it is. And you don't know that going into someone's house sort of thing. So you get there and they're like, oh, you can take your mask off. It's like, nah, I'd rather keep my mask on. I'd prefer if you just sort of stayed in the other room sort of thing. So I just get all the guys to make sure they're doing that and just being careful about that sort of stuff. And even now, even though it's sort of getting to the tail end of it, hopefully, we still like to keep on top of that because COVID, like having to I've just had my brother had to just isolate for the last week because he was a close contact. And it just does affect everything quite a lot. Like it might not seem like it, but when you're a small company like mine, having one person off really makes everything else a lot more hectic to sort of manage. So we're just pretty careful on that side of it. But in terms of work and stuff, we just like skyrocketed because everyone was staying home. Everyone was getting stuff done and they had money to do things because they couldn't go on holidays. And so that side of it just like boomed, and that happened. Luckily, for the most part, that happened just after our summer rush. So it was manageable, but we went through the busiest winter we've ever seen straight after the sort of main main lockdowns and all that sort of stuff.
Fantastic. Well, it sounds like business is booming, and it's really good to hear that you went out there on your own, and it sounds like things have really picked up. What do you think, if you could summarize, what is there anything you think you do as a company that really has helped drive that or made that possible?
I think just hard work, to be honest, and long hours. It's pretty, when you start off, you don't really realize how crazy it's going to be, but you spend a lot of your time working. You definitely spend more time working than not working. And to get through those like initial years, you just got to put in super long hours. And as long as you're sort of good at what you do, customer service and work ethic, those two things, anyone can excel at anything they do, really. It's but that was a bit crazy.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Cool. This has been great, Jarrad. I really appreciate you giving up the time and talking us through your experience. It's really useful. I think some great stuff in here that people would find super helpful if they're starting to think about going out on their own, or even already out on their own and not doing some of those things. We always finish on a sort of few questions we finish up on. I'd be quite keen to see where you land. If it wasn't air conditioning, which trade would you have picked, do you think?
I'll probably maybe electrical. I think they're probably the only two trades I would actually consider doing, to be honest.
Cool. Yeah, and there's sort of some similarities there, so that makes sense. And then if you had a choice of any work vehicle, we do like an annual van games, and it's always intriguing to see sort of people's sort of setup. What would it be?
I just bought a last year's model High Ace, which is really working well for me. So that's it's what I wanted. So I've got my dream vehicle for now. I like when I get off or semi off the tools in a few years, hopefully I'd like to get a Land Cruiser or something, just like a Ute. Yeah. So that's probably my dream car. But in terms of vans, I've pretty set up at the moment with mine, so I'm pretty happy with that.
Cool. And then if you won sort of $1,000 on a scratch card or the like, which tool or tool brand would you buy?
That's a hard question, I guess. I've pretty much got everything I need tool wise. Maybe like buy another drill or something. But I've set myself up pretty well over the years, so I don't buy too many new tools these days. I've got a pretty good setup.
And when you do you have a preference for brand when you think about drills?
I use Bosch Blue at the moment.
Yeah.
I used Makita for years. They're both really good, so I'm pretty happy with them. So I'd probably buy something. Something similar.
Cool. Sure. And then when you're there, and you want to treat yourself to a lunch when you're on site, what would you usually go for?
I usually try and support like sort of smaller businesses, like local lunch bars and stuff. Just get a sandwich or something. I'm not overly sort of fancy, and I usually eat on the go because I don't really sort of stop and sit down for lunch. It'd be just grab something on the way. You got
time, yeah,
that's it. So it's usually just like a sandwich from a lunch bar or something like that. So usually sufficient.
Cool. And then if there's anyone else, I'm quite intrigued. If there's anyone else you come across that you think would make for an interesting conversation with us on this show.
In terms of trades or people?
Trades or people, because I think one of the things actually I'm quite keen to do is actually potentially speak to kind of thinking about commercial, for example, speaking to a commercial building manager and thinking through how they pick a trade. I think is quite an interesting conversation. But it can be quite broad. Anyone? Speaking to someone who owns a building company would definitely be interesting, especially in these times with a lot of builders going bust and whatnot, and all the materials sort of prices skyrocketing. It'd be interesting, I guess, to see how they are able to sort of get by and how they decide who they're going to use and whatnot, especially with a lot of people sort of pulling out to do other things. It's interesting to see how they can sort of tie it together, for sure. I think you've spoken to pretty much most trades from the sort of podcasts that I've sort of viewed, so you got a good basis covered already. Yeah, cool, great. Well, Jarrad, thanks. I know you're a busy man, so I really appreciate you spending the time before you sort of kick into your day.
No worries.
And it sounds like things are great, and so it's always good to have these success stories, and they're pretty inspirational for other people thinking about getting into it without obviously not understating the level of hard work it took to get there, and still does by the sounds of it. So good luck with the continued success and finding a technician and getting into commercial. It sounds like an exciting journey, which we'd love to check in the future and see how that plays out for you.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate your time.
No, you're welcome. And as always, to everyone else that's listening, watching, we appreciate it. And if you have any comments, questions, and if you can give us a nice review across your chosen platform, we'd appreciate it. Until next week. Cheers. Bye.
And that brings us to the end of this episode. Behind the Tools is brought to you by Tradify, job management software for your trade business. If you enjoyed the podcast, let us know by leaving a review, and be sure to tell your mates about it. Email behindthetools@tradifyhq.com if you or someone you know would be keen to join the show as a guest.